I'm Nirupam from the Underwater Photography Guide, and I'm here today with Andy Sallmon from CNC, and we're going to discuss our thoughts on the Canon EOS R5 as well as CNC's new Canon EOS R5 underwater housing. Let's get started.
Hello, everyone. I'm Andy Sallmon. I'm an underwater photographer and here today to talk about this R5. I've been shooting it now for about 3 months, and I'm really excited about this. The most excited I've been about a camera in several years. Just a few things to kind of set it going here and get your interest. The R5 camera itself is the best autofocus I have ever had in my hands in a camera. And I've had a lot of cameras in my hands and tried a lot of them. I was amazed by the autofocus of this camera. Fast moving animals, of course, are always a little bit more difficult with autofocus, but because this has got over 1,000 autofocus points on the sensor, it's basically got autofocus points all the way from edge to edge. I don't know if you guys know it. Some of you may, some of you that are Canon shooters, some of you that may not. We all talk about back button focus all the time. And all that means is there's a little AF on or autofocus on button on the back of the camera and a lever on the side of the housing that you can push to get the autofocus going. So a lot of us, most of us that shoot Canon that I'm aware of, probably disable the focus from the actual shutter release button, so that's a shutter release only and a metering startup. And that's easy to do in the custom menus. You can do all kinds of things in the custom menus. It's almost endless. You could spend days fooling around in there, but there's a few real specific things you definitely want to do with the camera. So I like to use back button focus. Now, some of what you're hearing about the Canon R5 is this new animal eye autofocus with tracking. And in fact, it does work very, very well on some subjects. On other subjects, not so well. Topside, for instance, it works real well with birds, especially birds in flight, which are difficult subjects. So my thought was, well, gosh, what will it do with a fish or a sea lion or a shark or something underwater? So I tried it, and some cases it works, some cases it doesn't. What I don't want people to go away with thinking is, oh, they said the animal eye tracking on the R5 was the best thing in the world, and all I got to do is buy the camera, turn on the animal eye tracking, and away I go. I'll never get another out of focus image. Well, as a marine wildlife photographer primarily, it's all about keepers, right? It's the keeper ratio. How many images was I able to keep? And I'll tell you, 9 times out of 10, the images that I have to delete are the ones that aren't sharp. With Photoshop and the state of the art with Lightroom and all the different programs we have nowadays, you can, and the way that the cameras are set up now with so much dynamic range, you can pretty much fix almost anything except for focus. You cannot fix focus. So the bottom line is, the keeper ratio increases when you've got a camera that is highly capable with autofocus. Well, let me tell you right here and right now, this thing is highly, highly capable. It's an amazing camera. The animal eye tracking, back to that for a second, works in some situations. For instance, to give you some idea of what I'm talking about, I'm tracking a shark. Okay, so I've got a moving subject, which is always the hardest thing for any autofocus system to try and track. Some do well at it, some not so well. Canon's always done pretty well at it. When the animal eye is engaged and pointed at a shark, if the shark is in blue water, there's not another shark or 50 fish around it or a gravelly sandy bottom, it does a pretty good job. Tends to pick the shark up and stays in that focus area pretty well. You can use it very, very effectively like that. Another place where it works very effectively is with an animal sitting on the bottom. One of my favorite fish, of course, is, well, two, scorpion fishes and frog fishes. One of the reasons I love them, they look so weird. Everybody's eyes drawn to them. They're great, strange, interesting subjects, but they also hold still. And because they hold still, your chances of getting more in focus images are greater. So with a scorpion fish, a much easier type of a subject to use the animal eye tracking and the autofocus. You don't need the tracking, obviously, because he's not moving. Haven't tried it on one trying to catch something in mid-water. We'll see how that works. But for most of the underwater photography that we do, the animal eye tracking will pick up something else. It'll pick up some other contrasty thing. It could be something on the side of the animal, could be the gills on a shark. I had that happen several times. And it's not necessarily a bad thing. The gills and the eye quite often are in about the same plane of focus. So it still could increase your keepers, but I was too big of a chicken to completely test that theory out. So I went back to my regular back button focus. So one of the things that I'm getting to is if you want to try the animal eye tracking, or you want to be able to utilize it, and it's a great tool. It's a big supplement. You can set up your back button focus on the auto focus on button, which was where it normally is, and disable the focus from the shutter release. And then you can set your animal eye tracking onto the star button or some other button. The easiest one for me to reach was the star button because it's a big knob right next to the autofocus lever, or the autofocus on lever on the back of the housing. So I do recommend that. The camera's fast, 12 frames per second mechanical, and that's faster than any strobe out there, even turned way down. It does have the capability of 20 frames per second with the electronic shutter, and you'll watch YouTube videos endlessly about topside photographers complaining about rolling shutter. Well, rolling shutter can happen with anything that's moving that fast, basically, especially if you're panning, and if there's any upward or downward motion. If you want to show yourself rolling shutter, stand down here on the Southern California coast, where we've got helicopters coming from the naval base out to San Clemente and then back to Camp Pendleton, and shoot with rolling shutter, and shoot with electronic shutter, and you'll see what happens. The blades will basically turn up and get deformed. So for our purposes as underwater photographers, I don't think that the 20 frames a second electronic shutter is a big deal, but the rolling shutter is not a big problem either. So if you did want 20 frames per second for shooting your fish pictures, your sea lions, or whatever else you wanted, you could do it. It would be available light for quite a few of those images, though. So know that. So I keep mine at 12 frames per second mechanical. The other hitch with the electronic shutter was, I believe, you drop down to 12-bit capture instead of 14-bit capture, and I prefer the dynamic range instead of the 20 frames a second. The problem with 20 frames a second, of course, is you get a boatload of images, and that means you got a boatload of editing to do afterwards. Low light and noise. I found the camera easily bests my favorite old 5D Mark IV by 1.5 stops. So I kind of, on a cloudy overcast day here in Southern California, we've got murky water. My go-to ISO for a 5D Mark IV and in dark water was ISO 640. I really didn't like going past that because it just got kind of ugly looking, and you have to run a lot of noise applications over it. It just never quite looks right, the background water especially. What I find with the R5 is I have no qualms about going straight to ISO 1200, not at all. And I would go right above that. I've shot it above that. I don't really have much need to shoot it above that, quite frankly, but I guess if it were really dark or really deep, you could do it. At ISO 1200, I'm very happy. On the overcast days here, even at 100 feet, out diving in Wreck Alley on the Yukon, I find ISO 800 to be very satisfactory for most of my work. The electronic viewfinder, I have to say a few words about that because I'm a DSLR guy, right? And I've shot a lot of EVF cameras, Sonys, the Nikons over the years, and they're always really interesting to me, but there was always that bit of shutter lag and a little bit of that shutter blackout. And that just was one of those deals where, the old dog needed to learn new tricks, but it also was a nuisance for someone that was trying to shoot really fast. I use the example of sea lions, for instance, because they're quick. They're probably the fastest thing that we shoot underwater, marine life-wise, that I can imagine. So shutter lag, it's the lowest shutter lag I've ever seen in a mirrorless camera. I mean, it's almost instantaneous. The camera can be completely off and completely asleep, which is where you need it to be because it is pretty much a battery hog. All the EVF type cameras are. It doesn't matter whether it's Sony, Nikon, or Canon, or anybody else. But you click that button, any button, to wake it up. I like to just hit the autofocus button. So my little trick now is instead of hitting the shutter release button to wake the camera up, the camera comes up and it's automatically out of focus. I don't know what it does, but something turns it out of focus automatically. So what I do is I double tap the autofocus on button. So if I see something coming in and it's going to come by me and it's just a second away from me, I can wake the camera up at that very last second, put it up to my eye, bang, bang on the autofocus on. And what happens is the first hit turns the camera on, activated, and it's almost that fast that it comes on. And the second time I hit it, it starts into the focus. Now, I'm not saying it'll hit focus right off of that, but it'll start to focus at that point and activate the focus system. So double tapping that AF on button is a little trick I found just out of necessity. So pro tip for you. The shutter blackout is minimal. They all have it just a little bit. There's this little minimal time as you're firing away with the camera, but with the Canon R5, less than anything else I've ever seen out there, and I've shot them all. We have a 45 megapixel sensor. Awesome. Big, huge sensor, big files. You're probably going to have to buy a new computer if you haven't already upgraded. So we've got a over 8,000 by over 5,000 pixel image. We're coming up with anywhere from 80 to 90 megabyte files off the thing. It's incredible. But you have to remember, folks, you are going to crop. I know a lot of us think we don't crop very much. I was one of those people. And even just recently, I started looking at some of the shoots that I've done, and you can see, and I use Lightroom, you can see in Lightroom every image has been cropped. And when I go through and I finally get my final edit down, maybe a couple hundred images from a trip that I'm going to keep and market and sell, etc. Every one of them is cropped practically. There's almost nothing that hasn't been cropped. So having that 45 megapixel is a big advantage. Remember, we're using fisheye lenses and wide angle lenses primarily for underwater photography. For macro, not that big a deal. Don't probably need that huge file size. So one of my other favorite features of this camera is it's got a 1.6x crop, and you can set it up in the custom function. So by hitting one or two buttons real quickly, you can switch over to a 1.6x crop. And now it used to be that I had a 5D Mark IV, and then I had my 7D Mark II, and I liked that for macro, and I liked it for telephoto lenses. Of course, that's not what we're talking about today. But I also like to take my fisheye and put it on the 7D Mark II, because it gave it that 1.6 crop and basically cropped out almost all of the barrel distortion, at least I'd say about 80% of it, and gave me that nice center of the frame. So if I was working with smaller sharks or something, that was a great benefit. But I still needed two cameras to do it. I had to take either the full frame or the crop frame underwater. So that means I had to make a decision on the boat before I hopped over the side, which camera you're going to hand me. Well, now I don't have to worry about that anymore. Now I've got it all in one camera. I've got my 7D Mark II and my 5D Mark IV, only in a higher tech camera that has less noise, will shoot in lower light, has autofocus incredibly faster than either one of those two cameras. So I'm as happy as can be with this thing. That 1.6x, by the way, is great for skittish subjects. So if you get something that's a little bit smaller and it's a little further out, and you still have your 16 to 35 on there, you know, you can zoom it into 35, and it's almost like a macro lens when you hit the 1.6x, some kind of a fish that you've been hunting forever or whatever it happens to be. So I don't want to just go into the camera today. Those were some of the main things I really found that I loved about it. Remember, I'm coming from DSLR and way back to the film days as well, straight SLR. So it's a big change for me, even though I've been shooting these cameras for the last few years, testing them and reviewing them, that type of thing. From here, I wanted to talk about the CNC housing a little bit. That is my job.
Andy,
so I'll just change the notes over for a second.
So before you go into the housing, I just wanted to talk a little bit about, or add a couple things about the camera. And I wanted to also remind you guys that we will be showing photos and talking about the photos that we've taken at the end of this review. So you'll be able to see photos and videos as well. But I also just wanted to add that one of my favorite things about the R5 is the in-body image stabilization, which is also something that you can't get on a DSLR camera. Particularly with video, the stabilization really helps you take handheld video shots. And I was able to take handheld video with a 100mm macro lens without having any shake at all, which is basic. I still haven't shot a camera that can do that at this point. And then at the flip side, when you're talking about photography, I've been able to drop my shutter speeds down to 1/8 of a second, 1/13 of a second, which a lot of people aren't going to do underwater. But if you live in a dark, cold place like I do up in Washington, it can really help you get some nice blue or green in your background. So that's something that's been really cool. And then I know we didn't talk about video too much. So I did also want to add that the fact that this camera can take 4K video at 120 frames a second is huge for any underwater filmmaker. It means that you can be in plenty of situations that are in really high motion. You might be shooting handheld, you might have your wide angle lens, and you might be trying to keep up with all these fish. But because underwater environments are 3D, you tend to get a lot more camera shake than you would above water. So 4K at 120 frames a second, you can slow that right down and get some really stable video, a lot more than you could with any other full frame hybrid camera on the market until now. So I think, those two things are also really compelling about the R5. And I should mention, we did a review on the overheating, but if you have any concerns about overheating, I should mention that any other camera at this level, including the Sony A1, is going to run into some temperature issues if you're shooting a lot of video over a long period of time. But I should also mention that 20 minutes of 8K video, which is about where you start to overheat with the R5, is 300 gigabytes of data. So unless you have a lot of a lot of memory space, terabytes of memory at home, you might want to reconsider shooting that much 8K or 4K at 120 frames all in a row. I find during my dives, it's a few minutes at a time. So, but anyway, let's get to that housing, unless you had anything to add.
I do want to add to that because those are really, really valid points. The in-body image stabilization is incredible on this, and that doesn't help you with anything fast moving. But when we shoot a lot of stills, right? We shoot wrecks, we shoot kelp forests, we shoot reefs, etc. And if you do need to, for whatever reason, use a really slow shutter speed, the IBIS is fantastic in this camera. So that's a very, very welcome feature in the camera as well. And of course, for those of you that are into video, having that 8K capability is great. One of the things I wanted to add to what Nirupam was saying is I saw a lot of this camera get beat up an awful lot about the overheating issues. And everybody was talking about, 15 or 20 or even, maybe a little longer minutes of straight video before the camera would overheat. And I'm not a big videographer. I shoot a little bit. I've never shot 20 minutes of video straight in my life. I mean, if I was shooting a YouTube video, certainly, yeah, that would be an issue, that overheating. But as a marine wildlife photographer and an underwater photographer, I try to limit things to no more than a 40-second clip and maybe a minute-long clip if it's something extremely interesting that's happening. Maybe you come across the giant squid mating or something like that, and the whole ritual takes 3 minutes. Well, you don't have to worry about the R5 overheating at that point in time. It's not going to, and you can capture that in 8K video or 4K 120, which are the two modes that are going to have the biggest data transfer and create that all that heat and all those issues. Or you can just use the straight 4K ultra high, and the camera is an incredible video camera. We'll talk about it in just a second when we get into the features, but we can also add a monitor recorder to it, which would take away the whole overheating issue as well. So let me introduce the housing to you. I'm trying to hold it up here. I'm on a big high stand. So this is the R5 housing from CNC. I've got one of my favorite dome ports on it. It's kind of the medium-sized dome port, the glass optical dome port, kind of the do-all, jack of all trades. Big enough dome to shoot your sharks, your big animals, whatever with. Small enough to do close focus, wide angle, and I have no problem getting the strobes in close to this thing. A lot of people like the little mini domes because they're nice and small, but the problem with those is you lose that depth of field. So if you have something in the background that you also want to look in fairly sharp focus, like a diver silhouette, this is a better port. So that's what we got on the front of it here. The port lock system, if you're used to CNC, is really simple. It's just a click here, and internally, all you're doing is physically moving this little piece right here. It doesn't matter whether you can really see this or not in the video. I have the lights turned down in here, but it's real simple. It's kind of an infallible system. And if something did happen to it, all you'd have to do if it jammed up with something is take these two screws off and it's out of there. Other systems on the marketplace have a lot of moving parts, and a lot of moving parts, especially if you're a beach diver, or around a corrosive environment like the salt water that we're all favored to, can be a real problem. So the front of the housing looks like that, no big deal, nice looking. The back of the housing, one of the things I want to show you here is over here on the focus and zoom gear. Primarily, I mean, not that many people use manual focus, a little bit with macro. I just tend to like autofocus, it's just easier. But what we did was, you notice we'll put two gears in here. One is for the RF lenses and one is for the EF lenses because they fit at a different point. The reason for that is in order to use the EF lenses, this is an 8-15 here, you have to add the adapter. And that adapter is probably, I don't know, 15, 20 millimeters in size. So in order to be able to zoom this lens and not get rid of all your Canon lenses, if you've already got a lot of Canon glass, highly invested in it like I am, I must have $15,000 in Canon glass. I'd hate to have to go buy all this stuff again. And I intend to buy RF lenses at some point here because they do work very, very nicely and couple nicely with the camera. But for $99, I've got this Canon adapter that takes care of that. So I don't really have to worry about it. And my favorite fisheye, the 8-15, there's no replacement for that in the RF lineup at this point in time. There is for the 100 macro and for the 100-400 telephoto that I use for topside. They have nice 100-500, but I won't have to buy them as long as I can use this adapter. So that's a big plus on the housing.
Andy, will the housing have compatibility with the control ring adapter as well?
No, I don't think so. I just want to kind of double check and think that in my mind. It will, well, I don't know. I guess what you're actually asking is, will the housing be able to drive the lenses and the zooms? Would be yes. You could use that. It's about the same size.
Right.
What the compatibility issue would be, you wouldn't be able to access the
control ring.
Yeah, right. So they wouldn't help you there. But if you did have that one, it would also work with this.
Okay. Yeah, I just want to ask that question because I know a lot of our viewers and customers tend to either have one or the other, and they want to make sure they can use
I haven't personally stuck it in the housing, so I should be a little bit careful with that. But I know those things are about the same size, so close enough. The gears are thick, so even if it pushed the lens out a little bit, it wouldn't make any difference. The gears would still align. Plus, the zoom gears themselves have a little bit of movement. You can move them 2 or 3 millimeters and still get good adherence to the zoom on the lens barrel itself. The overall design of the housing, we were able to make it smaller. I didn't bring the 5D Mark IV because I knew I was going to have to hold the housing up for this in front of the little camera on here, and that's not great. I know you guys can't see everything here, but if I had the 5D Mark IV next to it, you'd see it is substantially larger. And our 5D Mark IV housing is not a large housing. As a matter of fact, I've had many people walk up from that have have housings from different manufacturers, and we all like to shop and look and compare who's got what and all that for our next version. Our 5D Mark IV housing is probably one of the smaller housings on the market. I don't think it's the smallest, but it weighs a little over 6 pounds. We were able to shave down the size and shave off about 3.5 pounds. Wow. So this one is a little bit smaller, so a little bit nicer to handle underwater. One of the new things we did we introduced these at DEMA 2019, actually, which seems like ages ago with this damn COVID pandemic thing, but we put these little rubber grips into our standard grip now. So they're molded to go right into these. You'll see the yellow will come on all the mirrorless cameras, and we have gray grips on the SLRs like the D850 and the 5D Mark IV. So they're nice, especially if you're diving in warm water. You have a thinner glove or no glove at all. I like them even in cold water with a thick glove on because they give you a little bit more of a better purchase on the housing itself. They're a little bit sticky, so cold, wrinkled up, waterlogged hands after the third dive of the day don't accidentally let go of the grip or anything like that. The cameras, all of our housings come equipped with dual fiber optic cable ports. The mirrorless, especially this one, comes with a single Nikonus port over here. These can be changed. These pigtails can simply be pulled off, and the internals there can be removed. It's actually fairly easy to do in the field. There's a process to it, but the instructions come with it. So carrying a spare one of those is a good idea. I don't shoot that much video. I probably don't need this other accessory port here, but I don't know if you can see that, but we put a huge, there's my finger sticking through it, a huge 24 millimeter port over here, so that the people that really want to get serious about video and they want more capture capability and they don't want to suffer from potential overheating, I guess if somebody's going to really shoot 30 minutes straight, can put a monitor recorder onto the top of the camera in a housing and run the bulkhead into here with the cabling, the HDMI 2 out cabling, right through that. So we put a big enough hole in there so that some of the other manufacturers that make those, like Atomos Ninja housings, for instance, and the cabling for that will go right onto our housing, no sweat. So if you're really into the video and that's what really excites you about the R5, that's also a big plus. The cooking this under the lights, I don't know if you can see those glowing or not, but all of our controls glow. So if you're into black water diving, like so many of us are nowadays, all of the levers, everything, you can look down. You don't have to shine your light back here. It'll be glowing. You'll be able to see where your controls are. And that's a big plus when you're out in the middle of the ocean there, swimming around, wondering what's creeping around in the night and trying to find all those small, crazy looking critters.
It's a small thing, but it's probably my favorite thing about CNC housings are those glow in the dark buttons. Especially up here in the Northwest where everything's just really dark. It's really awesome to have that. And all the controls are etched in on each button. So when it glows, you can actually see where the controls are too.
Well, up in the Pacific Northwest, most of your dives are kind of like a night dive anyways.
Yeah,
especially,
exactly.
Especially if it's an overcast day. For that matter, quite a few of the California dives I do can be like that when the fog's rolling in.
Yeah.
We also give the option of a TTL converter. There's a special converter made for the Canon R and now the R5, of course, that can go into the housing. Or if you like fiber optic cables, you can also just trigger with a straight flash trigger. The converters are, they give you the option between manual and TTL. There's a button on the back of the housing. I meant to show you that before I set that down. This button right here allows you to control and has a light on the back of it. The light lights up green for manual and blue for TTL. So you'll know which mode you're in. If for some reason you're having trouble with the TTL, you can switch to manual and just shoot everything away. The flash trigger, of course, is about half the price of the TTL converter and just a straight manual flash trigger. It takes a 1632 battery, so those are real easy to find. We did put a new bumper on the bottom of the housing. We found on the back half of the housing that sometimes they were leaning and sitting on the bottom of a boat and getting vibrated. You know, boats are great for vibration. That's about it. That's about all I wanted to say about it. We've got other accessories like optical viewfinders. We have a 180 viewfinder, which is one of my favorites. I don't dive without it anymore. As a matter of fact, there's a 1.2x magnification. On the bottom of the housing, there are also what in all of our publications is sacrificial zinc diodes. But anyway, they are zinc diodes, so they help reduce the dissimilar metal corrosion and those effects. And of course, those can be replaced. We sell the kits for those things as well. So that's about it for the housing. Really a tight, well-made, well-toleranced package. I beat the daylights out of it in Florida. We had some real rough water out there. The dive masters did their best. I had to bury a dome port. That's how rough it was.
Wow.
It got scratched really badly just getting back onto the boat. I think from now on, part of my deal is to make sure the dome port cover goes back on before I hand it over. And the dive masters, it wasn't their fault. The boat was just all over the place. So I beat the heck out of it. It took it, barely shows any abuse. Spent a week down there doing about 25 dives, and most of the days were bad. One day blown out completely. That's about all I want to say about the housing. The suggested retail or price is $39.95, so just under $4,000, and very, very well manufactured and well-made Japanese-made housing.
And this housing is available at Blue Water Photo. So feel free to reach out to them at sales@bluewaterphotostore.com if you're curious about the housing or have any more questions. Or you can message us on the guide as well, straight on Facebook, or send us an email at info@uwphotographyguide.com if you have any questions about this housing at all.
Blue Water is a real one of our more specialty dealers with the CNC housings. They really, really do a good job with them. There's more knowledge there than any of the other dealers that we've got at this point.
Thanks. Thanks. We appreciate that.
Sure.
Yeah, so I guess from here, I guess we can start showing some of our images.
Yeah, let's show some pictures.
Yeah, that we take with the R5. And I've got a video for you guys if you haven't seen it already at the end. But I will go ahead and share some photos. So let's start with Andy's photos. and I'm just going to pull it up now. All right. Oop, I'm just going to put this full screen.
Oh yeah.
There we go.
Yeah. This is a fairly recent one. I've been shooting the camera for about 2 months now. What are we in? May. Yeah, about 2 months now. Unfortunately, we've had some bad conditions here in California, so I didn't get to get out as much with it as I had hoped for. Typically, that's spring here in California. Our best conditions are winter, fall, of course, and summer. These are Atlantic spade fish, and a huge school of these sits over, I don't remember the name of the dive site. It might have been Breakers Reef. I can't remember for sure now, but these are a great photogenic subject. And I think you can see the detail. Can we blow up any one of those things that's got the better focus? One of the things that I noticed with the camera was the immediate, when I hit the focus right, when it was a keeper image, which quite a few of them were, quite a few more than normal, the detail and the sharpness in the image. And that's nothing to do really with the 45 megapixel resolution. I mean, you can take a really sharp image with a 20 megapixel, 16 megapixel camera and it'll look the same until you try to blow it up, of course. But the detail in some of these images, where the sharpness, right where the focus point was, I don't know where it was, particularly in this particular image, but wherever it is, the sharpness is the first effect that you'll see when you start uploading your images to your computer.
Yeah, I also wanted to ask, because I noticed the lighting is very even with this photo. Was this with a TTL or manual strobes?
I shot everything manual. I didn't shoot TTL on anything at this point. The converter I showed you, I kind of faked you out as one of my 5D Mark IV converters. They haven't sent me the CR converter yet.
Okay.
So, and honestly, I think we've got them on the shelf. I think they're being cheap. Okay. They only have a couple out there, so they want to make sure they get to the customers before they get to me.
Yeah.
They know they work already, so they don't need to hear my review of me, talking about it. One thing about TTL converters, these are slaved. This is a slaved TTL, so it's different than the old. If you're an old shooter, the old Nikonus days of TTL, the TTL was very, very accurate. Because of the way that it occurred. Now we're trying to shoot it based on information being reflected back to the strobe and the camera through light waves through the fiber optic cables. So one of the things that can happen if you do like TTL, like me, I really appreciate TTL. One of the things that can happen, there are instances where your shutter speed may be too high. I like to shoot the highest shutter speed I can shoot to keep things sharp, 200, 250th of a second. Occasionally, in some situations, you'll find that the TTL just doesn't want to synchronize with the shutter. This slave type TTL doesn't want to synchronize with the shutter above about 1/160th of a second. So it can be a limitation for some shots. So I wouldn't use it for bright sunlit backgrounds because of that.
Okay.
You need the high shutter speed. But everything else seems to work pretty well, especially macro, of course.
Yeah, I generally find for like sunlit backgrounds anyway, even if it's a different kind of TTL converter, I usually just turn my strobes all the way up.
And easy enough with ours, you just hit the button and it turns right to manual. So you're manual back and forth. You can test it, find out what subjects work well for you with the TTL, the DS TTL, and then go from there. All these images, by the way, were lit with dual YSD3 strobes. YS250s used to be my mainstay. When the D3 came out, I did some basic semi-scientific testing in my garage, all blacked out, put a 250 on one side, a D3 on the other side, and I was amazed that a little tiny strobe like that with only 4 AA batteries, what you're running like 6 volts, could keep up and actually exceed a YS250 in some cases. It was amazing.
Yeah, we have another nice video with Andy about the YSD3, so I'll drop that in the comments and description below on YouTube and on Facebook as well, so you guys can.
These are just some French grunts, they call these in Florida. I just thought it was kind of a colorful shot, a little bit of that red encrusting sponge on the background. And again, you can see the nice detail.
I was curious, did you have any opinions on the color rendering in the files when you're working with the raw files?
Well, I'm going through Lightroom, And it's different than if you use the Canon capture. I felt like Lightroom, the Adobe products, were doing a pretty fair job. I had read some things where people were really complaining about the Adobe products, but
Yeah.
I felt like I was keeping the kind of color palette that I wanted from the camera. I haven't put it into Capture One or anything other than that, so I kind of just stick with Lightroom. It's just easier for my workflow. I like the color palette of the camera. I feel it's similar. Reminds me of the 5D Mark IV. It's not exactly the same, but it reminds me of the 5D Mark IV, where the 7D had a little different look to it. Might have been because the 7D sensor is a bit of a noisy sensor. 5D Mark IV compared to the 5D Mark IV, I should say. This one gave me some pretty nice color. I didn't have to do too much as far as other than white balance correction and then taking out a little bit of the aqua.
Yeah, I think, what I found with the R5 that was interesting to me is compared to like Sony and Nikon cameras, and even some other Canon cameras, I had to up the saturation more than I did the vibrance. So like when I use the vibrance tool in Lightroom, usually that does it for me when it comes to adding colors with other cameras, but it seemed like there just wasn't quite enough color in the dull tones in the image, so I'd actually have to use the saturation tool to get every color kind of up just a little bit more. But it wasn't. I didn't use it a lot. I mean, straight out of the camera, the images were pretty good. But as with any raw file, you might want to add a little bit. So.
Sometimes it's not. What I found sometimes it's not the lack of color, but it's often a lack of mid-tone contrast.
Yeah.
And it can also be a hue adjustment to the color. So if you go into the HSL editor below, like in this picture here, the Fisher yellow, if you wanted to boost that yellow, I find this yellow very pleasing. I didn't need to boost it, but if you wanted to boost that yellow, you could do that. And the other thing that's very interesting is if you desaturate certain colors in the HSL, for instance, like aqua, if you desaturate the aqua hue, you'll find that you'll get rid of some of that kind of no man's land shadow where the strobe didn't fill in, but it's not blue, so it looks kind of not so good, just kind of ugly looking aqua. So if you desat the aqua hue, you can bring out the blue, and the other colors seem to get enhanced when you do that. So that's almost it's almost like a filter I applied to quite a few of my underwater images.
Yeah, I do that as well in blue water quite a bit. Not so much in green water. It's kind of a whole different ballgame there. But,
this is sorry.
Oh, go ahead. Yeah.
This is a close-up of a lemon shark, and we were talking about cropping earlier. This is probably a 50% crop.
Wow.
And one of the things you'll find with shark dives, unless you've got a lot of money and can pay, look at the detail. It's amazing.
Yeah, that's incredible.
Ampullae of Lorenzini, look at his eye, the teeth, everything, just sharp, sharp, sharp. When you dive with shark outfits, sharks are going to go towards the bait, but you don't know what vector they're going to take to it. So you try to position yourself someplace, and inevitably some other diver that, with a GoPro usually doesn't understand what you're trying to do, and that you're shooting a 180 degree point of view lens will be in the background. And if they're over in the corner, you might be able to remove them in Photoshop or something like that. So you find yourself cropping a lot of images just to get rid of some of that kind of thing, or maybe the feeder is in a unusual looking pose for a diver, not something you want to see in the background of a beautiful natural image like this. So by cropping it like that, by being able to crop it, having those 45 megapixels is a huge plus. Now, I could crop in camera by just hitting that 1.6 crop factor. And as it turns out, the more I look at my images, the more I'm probably going to start using that. Plus the fact I still come up with a 30 megabyte file, very, very usable file size. I mean, I can print that 3x4 all day long and put it up on a wall, and you never know the difference.
Yeah.
But I still kind of like to use the overall large size, and I haven't adapted to that yet. But I'm starting to wonder if maybe for the medium-sized animals and sharks and sea lions and things like that, that 1.6 crop factor might be great, and you get more images on a card with it too.
Yeah. One of the cool things I'm noticing in this image actually is it looks like this guy's been hooked before.
Yep, he's got a
And
hook there still.
yeah, it's pretty amazing how it captured that clear nylon string.
Yeah,
So
you got the monofilament and the shadow
yeah,
from the monofilament. Unfortunately, it's a little unsightly. I didn't want to I didn't want to modify these images too much. If I were to finalize and put that image into my file, I'd probably get rid of that shadow at the very least, and probably get rid of
yeah,
the monofilament. But it's a good point to look at that it picked that up.
yeah.
Another lemon shark, of course, full body. Again, this is another crop. I don't think it was 50%, but it was probably at least 30% of crop. So that 1.6 crop factor would have worked fairly well for this as well. The here again, you know, the color palette from the camera, I've desaturated the aqua hue a little bit to try and get back to a little more of a grayish body on the shark. Lemon sharks do have a little bit of a yellow tone to them. But with too much aqua in there, it turns into this funky looking, almost brown tone. Looks like a UPS truck. So just not good. Another one, and if you blow that up on the eye or the mouth or anywhere near the nose, which was where the focus point was.
Oh wow.
Yeah. Now, I don't know for sure whether that last one or this one, but I was using the animal eye focus and tracking
Okay.
when I picked it up. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, it looks like it was probably this one because it looks pretty spot on.
It's really
Um,
sharp. Yeah. And remember, that's cropped, you know,
yeah.
30, maybe 40%. I don't know.
Sorry, I was just trying to use my tool, but it's not working right now to go in further. But that's okay. We'll check out the next one. Ooh, this is awesome.
Yeah, loggerhead turtle. It's the turtle nesting season there in Florida right now, so it's a good time to be out there diving. Some of the reefs, the turtles really like going to. This guy was unfortunately asleep, so you know, I didn't want to like reach over and nudge him. Hey, buddy, wake up and smile for the camera. It's too very, very annoying touristy kind of thing to do. So I did the best I could with him, and then left him alone. Left him to his sleep. Sometimes just by you being there and firing the camera a few times in the bubbles, they'll wake up and they'll look. But what I definitely don't want to do is scare him till he has to leave his little bed there and leave the bottom. I want him to be able to rest. He's busy, or maybe she. I'm not sure whether it was a he or she, but either way, they're all very, very busy in the nesting season. So I don't want to take any of that good energy away from them.
Yeah. And this was with the Canon 8-15?
All these are Canon 8-15, believe it or not. Yeah, yeah. So there you see, even with the sharks, a lot of the sharks are 6-7 feet long.
Yeah.
The capability of the sharpness of the camera, even when it's cropped down like that, is pretty amazing. When I first started to download the images to the computer and looked at a few and expanded a few, looking for keepers, I started to find that the focus was pretty much on for about 85% of the images that I had taken.
I agree. I mean, I was pretty amazed at the keeper rate. It was about almost 80% for me as well. I mean, just it's pretty, yeah, incredible.
I don't know about everybody else is watching this, but that doesn't happen too often with moving subjects and dynamic situations where you're in mid water, you know, 50 or 60 feet with 12, 14 sharks cruising around, and you're looking for, you know, opportunities. They're all over the place and they happen very suddenly. And sometimes the sharks will come straight at you. I don't think they see very well when they're coming straight at you. So they'll come very, very close to the housing sometimes.
Yeah.
And the camera just picked that up, no problem. I know with the 5D Mark IV, it would have been half the number of keepers probably, which is not a bad autofocus system. I mean, it's dated now, but it's a pretty good camera.
Yep. Ooh, nice one. That's a hogfish? Is that a hogfish?
Yep, that is.
Any the turtle?
I don't know my Caribbean fish as well as I should. Haven't been in a while. Haven't been anywhere in a while. Spanish hogfish. No, wait a minute. Spanish hogfish is the one down
in Baja, or is it?
Yeah, it is. It's a wrasse, and I think it is a hogfish. I can't think of the name of this one right at the moment. Real pretty. Love them when it was actually cleaning this loggerhead when I came up, and the loggerhead was alert and awake, being cleaned, and tolerated me just fine. I kept my distance. Again, this is a cropped image. So I shot it at full megapixel, 45 megapixel, and then cropped down probably about 50%. and you
Yeah.
can see it holds up very, very well. So you could have a fisheye lens on this camera, and as long as you take your time a little bit and focus properly, there's no reason you can't crop the heck out of these things.
Yeah, that's great detail. Um, Sweet. So, Andy?
Yeah.
Oh,
So
yeah.
yeah, I'm still here. This is a school of porkfish going by. Whoops. There we go. School of porkfish going by. One of the first days I was there, the water was kind of greenish. So it was, hey, welcome to your diving for the week. And I thought, oh my God, I just left green water in California. Definitely wasn't as green as out here with 10-foot visibility up, but there it was like 30-foot viz and green and dark and stormy and blustery, so not much sun coming down to the reefs. But these guys going by, and I thought, well, it's a nice colorful shot and some real detail we can look at in the scales and the eyes. So, and the color itself, pretty good, except it's like I said, the background's a little bit dark. I didn't try to recover it too much because if you bring the exposure up, you overexpose the fish now because of the flash.
Yeah. Yeah, it's tough.
Yeah.
Oh, wow. That's an awesome shot.
This is on a blackwater dive, believe it or not. He looks like he's sitting on something, but he's on a blackwater dive and he's about to eat. He's got some little piece of plankton or whatever it is in there. I shot this guy for about 10 minutes on a blackwater dive out there. And there was all kinds of neat stuff cruising around out there in the Gulf Stream. Walker's Dive Charters down there is one of the best for this type of stuff. I think they pretty much originated it down there. Some of my friends, my friend's father, Bill Walker, operates the boat for the most part, but some of my friends were working with him for a while. They're no longer there, but they did a lot of this blackwater type of stuff out there. Unfortunately, I haven't had much of a chance to get it out locally for macro, despite the conditions. When we did have some decent conditions here, I like to test cameras in wide angle and test them on the wreck alley out here, the Yukon, and it did very well on that. I didn't add any of those images, but one of the things that happened out there was because of weather, I lost a day and some other issues happened with shark diving. Had three diver emergencies in one day, not me. I rescued one of them. So I ended up only with one full day of shark diving out of three. One got blown out for weather. I was going to shoot the Blue Heron Bridge, which is one of my favorite macro sites, and anybody that knows about it or has dove, it's just spectacular. It's like diving Lembe Strait almost.
Yeah.
So I wasn't able to do that. So the only macro I really brought back to look at today was from this blackwater dive. The problem was I like to shoot 100 millimeter macro lens at the Blue Heron Bridge. So I didn't pack a 60 millimeter macro, which is the right lens for a blackwater dive. So I really made my life difficult with the 100 millimeter macro, and yet putting that camera and its autofocus system to task with this shows how good that autofocus system was. I didn't get the keeper ratio that I wanted, but it still did a very, very good job considering the fact that really had the wrong tool for what I was trying to do.
Yeah, I mean, this is an incredible image. How much was this one cropped, if at all?
These are not cropped much. Well, let's see. That's not true. I think that amphipod that's coming up, I think that was cropped. He was really tiny. This one's probably cropped maybe 20%, 15, 20%. Okay.
Yeah, that's not much at all.
Yeah, I mean, because I had the 100 macro on, I was extended. So, I wouldn't have even considered putting the 1.6 crop to work that at night.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, the details are awesome on that. So.
Oh, jumping back to the sharks.
Oh, yeah.
See if you can magnify his nose. I think there's pretty good detail in this shot. I think this was one of the first ones that really kind of dazzled me. And this shark is probably, there were divers all over it, if I recall, but it was so nice and sharp. I wanted to show it as a representative of what the camera will do underwater. And I think this one is cropped at least 50% and also, yeah. So look at the detail on that. I mean, it's.
Yeah, you can see individual scales.
Yeah. I just don't even know what to say. I don't even really
Yeah.
need that kind of detail for image, but it's great to have it. And knowing that this is cropped like that and then expanding it, it's like you're expanding it 400% or something. So
Yeah.
pretty amazing.
Oh, there we go.
That's that amphipod I was
Oh, nice.
talking about. I didn't know. I thought it was a little shrimp. One of the gurus of the little blackwater stuff that flies around out there had to tell us it was an amphipod, but I thought it was kind of a cool,
Yeah.
and really bright orange, so I was able to spot it pretty easily. And I had to find subjects that weren't moving around too much. I found some of those larval flounder or sole or whatever they were, and they were just moving so
Right.
much. Like I couldn't. I got them in the frame and fired it, but they just didn't work. But some of these guys were holding a little more still. They would, suddenly move and then stop, so I could really work with the 100 macro on them.
Yeah.
So the detail is there. And this one is definitely cropped heavily. This is probably at least a 50 or 60% crop.
Okay.
Yeah, and yet you still got this great detail. Where you see the end of the antenna, that's just a depth of field issue. That's not
Yeah.
a loss of sharpness.
Wow.
Yeah, sea butterfly. We have those out on this coast too. I think it's a different genus or different species,
Yeah.
but really cool looking thing. Kind of
The
hard to light.
The bokeh came out pretty cool on the back.
Yeah,
Like you can
yeah,
see the contrast. Yeah.
yeah. For the clear body itself, it's a difficult subject to shoot in some ways because you're moving around, it's moving around, and you're out in mid water out there just floating in the dark, and you can overlight it because you've got that solid area, that little whatever it is down there, and then you got all these transparent areas where the light's just blasting right on through it. So you have to get the lighting just right, and of course that changes as the distance changes.
Yeah.
And then finding the focus point is another one. So word to the wise, use a 60 macro lens and shoot a lot when you're doing black water.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, this is it's a gastropod. It's like a little snail. It's actually kind of what we would consider upside down. If you look above those eyes, or well, I guess below the way the picture's oriented. This was right side up for him.
Oh, I see.
You see those little
Yeah. He's
little
got
antenna or whatever. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it's a little Belliger snail. Beliger. That's what they told me.
Okay.
Oh, and here's a perfect case of where animal eye focus works great on something like this guy because of the contrast of his dark eye right there. Really, really picked it up. It did jump back and forth a little bit off his nose. One of the things I was going to say about the animal eye focus is if you got a still subject like this, you can mess around a little bit. If you go in with your normal autofocus, which I usually use a center or an expanded cross, I forget what they call it. I think it's just expanded area focus. So I've got a little bit of bleed around the sides instead of just using the single focus point. I'll place that focus point in regular autofocus on the animal's eye, hit it, and then I'll just move my thumb over to the animal eye focus button that I'm using, the one I've assigned to use for it. And it seems to track better when you do that. It seems to pick things up better once you kind of introduce where you want the focus to be. I don't know how scientific that is, but it seemed to work better when I did that first. So if I hit the AF on at the eye and then just shifted my thumb over, I didn't even have to, come away from the viewfinder. I keep looking through the viewfinder because it was just simply moving my thumb to the right. And the next thing it hits is that button that I assigned it to, which was the asterisk button. It would track and pick up the animal eye autofocus better.
That's interesting. I shoot it a little bit differently, so I didn't notice that because I didn't do it that way. But I think I might be saying the wrong thing here, so don't quote me on this, guys. But I think I remember reading something about the autofocus. I think it's on the R5 has a little bit of machine learning built in to it when it comes to tracking. Yeah. What I actually would do, and I agree with scorpion fish, sculpins, bottom dwelling fish. I had a really easy time with the eye autofocus tracking, but I would put it on the normal autofocus tracking mode, and then when I would, if it didn't hit the eye, I would bring in my autofocus box and then use that to track. Um, but it seemed to work pretty good. It would just flip over to eye autofocus when I was in that mode if it decided that it saw something.
Yeah, there's a couple of different ways you can try and do this, and so far the success has been pretty good when you do something like that, like Nirupam saying, using the tracking or just using the straight off autofocus before. I call it introducing the animal eye tracking to the autofocus.
Yeah.
I don't know what other word to use for it. It's kind of like you're telling it, hey, focus here, and then when you switch over to that mode, it seems to do a better job.
Yeah.
I'm not sure why that is. I don't know if that has anything to do with the AI, but perhaps I got to keep working on it.
Yeah.
I want to do sea lions with it. That'll be the major take.
Yeah.
You have a big eye and a small head like humans and dogs and things that are probably programmed into that.
I think it would work quite well. Yeah. I mean, sea lions are related to dogs, so.
So this is Patrick the tiger shark. He's one of the stars out there for the two operations that are doing shark diving out of Jupiter, Florida, which are Salty Divers and Emerald Charters. They both do the same area. There's a little wreck right next to him. It would be off to the right. If you look to the lower right, you can see a little bit of shadow. That's from this tiny little tugboat wreck. So the photographers are allowed to set up down along the side of the wreck where the shark comes into the bait, which is nice. And the people that don't have cameras stay up high, so they're not kicking everything up. A lot of shark diving operations, they just let everybody all over the place, and there's just silt and all. I haven't cleaned backscatter out of any of these images, so there's a little bit of bait or kicked up stuff. Of course, the feeder's moving around. He's got to, double check there's no bull shark coming up from his six, getting ready to bite his leg or something. So there is a little bit of movement. Of course, the other photographers move around a little to get, where they need to be for the shot, but they keep the divers without cameras get a great view from up above. And the only thing that might bug them a little bit is some of the photographers' bubbles once in a while. But other than that, they've actually got a great vantage point. I thought about going up there a few times, but I didn't do this enough where I decided to switch anything. I wanted to make sure I had success so that we could, post this little review for everyone.
Yeah.
Again, I don't know if you blew that one up or not. I was talking, and really, really nice.
With the shark?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I didn't.
When I tried the animal eye tracking near the gravelly bottom like this, it went straight to picking up the bottom every time.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Yeah, because it was seeing eyes in there.
I don't know. It just picked up that extra contrast.
Yeah.
This is might have this wrong. People from Florida are gonna say, God, I'm an idiot. I think it's the wreck of the Anna Cecilia, and the grouper is named. This is a Goliath grouper that stays there, and he is named Braveheart from like the movie Braveheart because he's brave. He'll swim right up to you, and he's always around the wreck someplace. The rest of them leave and migrate off to wherever they go. Braveheart hangs around, protects his room. So he was a fun subject because he was so friendly. He actually swam too close to the camera at first, and of course, all the other photographers with me were all like, "Yeah, like paparazzi around the Queen of England or something."
Yeah.
So anyway, once they all left, I swam back up current and went over the side of the boat and down and hung out with Braveheart for a little while. Got this shot with him. This is a crop shot as well. I cropped the sun off the top. There's a couple other wreck shots coming up where I left the sun in intentionally so you could see how the camera handled a semi blown out highlight. But this guy is fairly sharp.
Yeah.
And the dynamic range with the ship back there in the shadow, popped right out. I think I was using, I'd have to look for sure, but I think I may have been using ISO 500 or 600 at this point. And some pretty clear water. This was later in the week where the water turned blue again, and it might be stripped out of there for the when I sometimes when I do an export, I'll just put the copyright on there and then strip it out just so there's less. So the camera just constantly amazed me. I had to get over the electronic viewfinder bug, which is hard for any DSLR shooter, being my first one that I owned, not one that I rented to test and review. So once I got the hang of things and what to tap when, and spent the appropriate amount of time actually learning the camera a little bit more, then it was a no-brainer.
Ooh, that's awesome.
Yeah. So the sun is obviously blown. I think I had to go to, I don't remember what the settings were, but I think I was probably upward around f16 or just above f11, probably to pull this shot off. And
I love the shark silhouette.
that was just one of those lucky. This bull shark was circling around for the longest time, and everybody's shooting him 20 feet away. I'm like, oh, quit waiting your time. Let's go shoot the wreck. And he came through the top when I was shooting this. I shot a series of this end of the wreck here, and he came right through the top. I have one of them right in the sun too, but you get that light so strong that it bled around him a bit. But this is how well the camera could pull back, I should say, in post the sun. This was obviously the raw image. It's pretty blown out up there.
Yeah.
But I'd say it was able to pull back that highlight a good 2 stops, which made it into a picture, because if you couldn't with this, where the sun and the wreck are positioned, there's no way you're going to crop that out of there. Plus you'd crop the shark out, which is kind of cool. So it had to be. So I had to see what it would do, and I worked with it a little bit, and
I mean,
too bad a job.
The details are incredible. Like, there's only this one point in the center there where it seems like there's lost data, but everywhere else,
it's completely clipped in that, exactly, and that's that one little area. But for that to be the only area that's lost, like that, not too bad.
Yeah.
And I'd hate to have to have just deleted this image, because the shark came over, and it's got a nice flow to the whole image. That backside of the wreck over there, it's sitting up with all the Tubostria and the encrusting sponges and things. So it's a nice serene image, and then having the shark in there just gives it adds a little more life to a very still type look.
Wow. And look at you can see individual polyps and everything.
Right.
And quite a bit of detail.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think this might be my favorite from the series. I just love how the composition came out in the detail of the sun.
I look at it and I'm like, that sun's still a little blown for me. But what was I going to do if I had gone to f22? I think that the little bit of the bottom and just the angle of the bottom, which gives you a feel, gives the viewer a feel or a reference.
Be a bit too dark,
it get too dark and just look too blocky.
Oh. All right.
So because the camera is so good at handling that that over exposure area, I was able to pull it out in Lightroom.
So that's the last in your series. We could go real quick over to my series. Mine's I took all my photos up in the Northwest. They're a bit greener.
Travel lately.
But yeah, I can show you guys real quick some of the things I noticed about the camera on that end. So I will just I'm just gonna switch over real quick. I don't have as many photos. Let's see. All right. So I just thought this was a good way to show some bokeh. I think this fish is probably only a centimeter, or no, maybe 2 to 3 centimeters. It's a very small mosshead warbonnet up here in the Northwest. So I think I had a diopter on here, a Kraken diopter, and the 100mm macro. And yeah, this was at f16. So this is kind of the bokeh that you could get. I think it's kind of an interesting look. I don't have anything to say in particular, just because it's the bokeh that you'd expect from the 100mm macro, but I think it just shows the detail quite nicely. This is a heavy crop. This fish was really, really small, so I did need to crop it quite a bit. But overall, I was pretty happy with that.
Do you think you would have been able to use the 1.6 crop on it?
Yeah, I think that probably would have actually been a good idea in this case. But this guy was moving so quickly. These guys are kind of notorious for, once they see you, they stop and then they go, and then they stop and go. And it would have just added another element of, will I even get him in the frame?
Yeah, yeah. Don't make it harder than it has to be.
Yeah. This guy I like this one quite a bit. He was actually facing up with his mouth open, and I don't know why he was doing that. Most fish, like, he wasn't yawning. He was just kind of opening his mouth like that. Um, and behind him, there's actually a um, a gravel background. So I was pretty happy I got the black background with him. Um, but yeah, I just thought the details came out quite nicely on the skin. You can see all of the little photophores and everything. So that's kind of a cool thing to see there. Yeah, this is just kind of a cool shot, close focus wide angle with the Canon 8-15. This is a tiny little jellyfish. She might have only been about maybe 3 centimeters in the kelp forest, and I just liked how it came out. I thought it picked up the details quite nicely in the translucent area of the image, and I just like how the bokeh turned out with it being a bit of a shallow depth of field. So,
I forgot to ask those
yeah.
two previous fish, the macro shots. Did you use the animal eye focus on those?
Yeah, so it didn't work with either of these fish. And it could have been the position. So, with this one, it's definitely just because of the speed of the fish. I just don't think it had enough time to pick it up. And it's a very, very small fish, so it didn't really fill the frame. With this one, I can't say for certain that it didn't work. It might have. But I might have even switched it to single autofocus without using the eye tracking. So he wasn't moving around a lot, so I might have just done it that way.
The reason I asked was because the eyes were super sharp on both images.
Yeah, and even if it wasn't, like, I know for a fact this one, animal autofocus didn't pick it up, but I used the tracking, and the tracking really held on to the fish really well. I mean, the focus is very sticky. I'd say it's similar to the A7R4 or even the Sony A1 in terms of how well it can track. So I've been really happy with that, and it kind of puts Nikon to shame. I personally own a Nikon Z6, and in the last 3 years, I didn't really feel like upgrading, but this is the camera that made me like, I feel like maybe I should upgrade because I've just been thoroughly impressed with the autofocus system.
Yeah, it's a no-brainer. If you're coming from even a great mirrorless camera, even some of the newer ones, the R5 is, I was just amazed by the autofocus capability.
Yeah, it's a step above. And to be honest, I mean, so one of the things that we've kind of haven't mentioned is that the Sony A1 came out recently, and that's almost the comparable camera to the R5. It's Sony's flagship camera, and so far that's really been the only camera that I've shot that really rivals the R5 when it comes to autofocus, when it comes to well, not even stabilization. I don't think it's as good as the R5 when it comes to video features. But with a $2,800 price difference, I mean, the R5 is a very compelling camera. You can get pretty much the best camera on the market for the best value. So that's been, it still remains my favorite mirrorless camera currently.
The R5.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's been a while. I mean, I think I shot these shots in September. I just like this photo. I actually don't know why I put it in here. So I'm going to skip that. This is another example of the dynamic range. So this was a much darker water, probably a lot less visibility than you had. But I was still able to get some of these details at the surface, and you can just see some of the ripples on the top of the water. So for Washington, this is about as good of a sunburst as you can get, especially considering I was about 40 feet underwater here. Yeah. And I did like how the red colors really turned out in the files. This is one where the tracking really helped. This jellyfish was moving kind of fast in current. And I just quickly adjusted my settings to match the sun at the top. That is the sun. What I think is really cool is I'm not directly pointing towards the surface, and you can still see a little bit of those ripples at the top. It's very, very hard to see, but I mean, it's capturing detail that Most cameras would not be able to capture at that point. One thing that this image also kind of shows me is it is a high resolution sensor. This is a bit of a crop. But I mean, it's pretty clean when you compare it to the Z7 II versus the A7R4 as well. Both those cameras, because they have a high resolution sensor, they tend to have a little bit more noise. I thought this was pretty clean for what you would normally get. Yeah,
Wow.
this is a red Irish lord. It's a local sculpin. The animal eye autofocus tracking did work here. I got some really cool video of it as well. Now, this is one where like I felt a little iffy about this photo when it came to the color. I thought the color rendering was good, but it wasn't 100% accurate. And I feel like Nikon might have done a better job on this subject in particular. But the colors are very difficult on this fish, and it's a very weird color pattern for the camera to pick up. Overall, though, I'm like pretty happy, but I did like have to mess around with it a little bit more in Lightroom just to get the coloring a bit right.
That is sharp, sharp, sharp. I mean, that's
Yeah,
100%
yeah. I mean,
detail.
let me see
Wow.
if I can zoom in a little bit more on those eyes. But I mean, yeah, it's pretty incredible, and that tracking did pick up the eye really well. Yeah, I was really happy with that.
Amazing.
And I think this was let's see. So the stabilization played a little. Oh no, never mind. Yeah, this is f9. So it's a little bit wider than I would have liked. But I thought, yeah, I mean, it was pretty detailed. The corners are pretty sharp with the 8-15, even at f9. So.
Definitely a keeper there. Oh, yeah.
Oh yeah, yeah. This next one was kind of neat. I just put this one in here. This is a wolf eel. These guys are really friendly, and this one in particular, I know this guy really well. He comes right up. But what I thought was really crazy is I never noticed he had uh, a parasite on his eye.
Mm-hmm. On his eye, yeah.
Yeah, and this was the photo that really showed that to me. And I've been diving with him for years. So. Oh, is that the last one? Okay, yeah, that's the last one in my series. I said that was a shorter series. So as a final thing, I thought I would show you guys some video and just give you a little bit of commentary on that. I'm going to try to stream it through Facebook Live. It could be a little bit dicey. We'll see how well it does, just because it's going through Zoom into Facebook Live. So let's give that one a quick shot. Okay, here we go. So this is from my original review, and it's on YouTube. I couldn't actually find the video file, so we're gonna watch this on YouTube. But this will just show you some sample underwater video in 8K, as well as 4K. I had to downsample to 8K. This is a 4K video, so. So this is an 8K clip right here. That was downsampled. And I just really love how it was able to capture the light rays so well. This was 4K at 60, and I slowed this one down, which I think really benefited. And it's probably going to show up laggy in Facebook. But this is, oh, here we go. Here's the animal eye autofocus tracking. So it just immediately switched as soon as that that fish came into view. It got the eye like that. So that I thought that was pretty cool how quickly it did that. Now this shows the IBIS, the in-body image stabilization. This is a 100mm macro lens, and I was hand holding that. So that was really cool. This is a standard picture profile. There is C-Log available in the R5, but I mean, if you're going to shoot in RAW, that gives you the most color options. So if any colorists out there, I think the fact that this camera shoots in RAW, like, I think that's the reason why Canon doesn't really offer that many log profiles. Though I should say that Sony kind of has a little bit more options there. Yeah, again, this guy was moving pretty quick, so I had to track him. Anyway, so that's the
Wow.
full video.
Did a great job on the tracking.
Yeah, I was pretty impressed with that. Yeah, so that's the R5 and the CNC housing in a quick overview, or a long overview. Andy, I don't know is there anything else you want to add?
No, I think that's it. I think we've had them on long enough. if they've watched this far, thank you for watching us for this long.
Yeah, so hopefully that was informative for you guys. If you have any questions at all, like I said, feel free to reach out, drop a comment below. We'll put this on YouTube, so drop a comment there as well. Send us an email, give us a call. We're always happy to answer any questions about the R5 and the CNC housing as well. This is the first time that I've been able to see the CNC housing, and I've actually pretty impressed with how it looks in the form factor. It seems really nice. Especially for this camera. So I'm really looking forward to getting in the water with it.
Well, we'll get you out there as soon as we can, as soon as we get some better conditions. Huh?
Yeah, definitely. Hopefully conditions will ease up kind of everywhere. It's been kind of tough to get some good diving in. But yeah, thanks a lot, Andy. Thanks so much for your time. And I guess that's it, everyone. We'll see you later. Hope you have some good dives out there.
Thank you. Thanks for watching.
All right. See you guys.
Bye.